Okay, well, welcome everyone to September's VIA webinar. We're pretty lucky this month to have Todd Wylie from NZTA come and speak to us about vehicle safety ratings. As I've said before with these webinars, I'm really trying to do a mix of some of the industry issues that we face from time to time, things that are happening in the policy world. But at the same time, I also want to try and touch on issues that are important to the business of vehicle importing and vehicle retailing. And safety ratings is a pretty huge part of how we can try and get people into safer cars and make them understand what a safe car looks like and what is that. How do we define that? Certainly, one of the things that I came across coming in to look at safety is suddenly realizing that there's actually many different ways of trying to determine what safety is, and that can get confusing. But it's important that everyone in the industry has an understanding of how we look at safety. And it's been in the news lately. There's been a couple of things about how ANCAP is looking at its safety ratings. We've had some interesting conversations with Todd about the size of vehicles as well. That's always a really interesting question of is a big car safe? It might be safe for the person in the car, but how safe is it for people outside the car, for the environment, that sort of thing? So there's all sorts of really interesting things we could get into. We're going to ask Todd to do a bit of a presentation, introduce himself, do a bit of a prezzo, go through the safety ratings. We'll hold off questions until the end, and then we'll start and see if we have a bit of a conversation at the end. I think the Q&A function is going, so you should be able to use Q&A. Otherwise, throw something into the chat if you've got a question and you don't want to forget it, and we'll look at those as we come through. But at the end of the presentation, yeah, we'll open up to questions and have a bit of a conversation. But for now, what I'll do is hand over to Todd Wylie from NZTA's Principal Advisor on Vehicle Safety. Pretty well known to a lot of people in the industry, but Todd, maybe give you a bit of an introduction and let us know what you're going to talk about, and I'll turn myself off.
Cool. Thank you, Greg, and thank you to everyone who's joined. There's definitely a couple of familiar faces in the audience today, so thank you. I will share because my first slide is who am I, so that might kind of help. So hopefully, if we push the right buttons, cool. Hopefully you guys can see that, and on the first slide there. So yeah, for those who don't know me, I am Todd Wylie, Principal Advisor Vehicle Safety at NZTA. So I am the internal business owner within NZTA for the Right Car website and the associated safety ratings and calculations that sit behind that. I come from a background in automotive media and modified vehicle regulation, and I can see some people from that side on here today as well. I'm currently the chair of the ANCAP Council, which is essentially all of the stakeholders within ANCAP. We all obviously meet to make sure we're getting what we need out of ANCAP, and part of that is the Technical Council as well. Chair of Austroad's Vehicle Technical Reference Group, which is again government jurisdictions across Australia and New Zealand that all play a part in vehicle safety regulation, if you like, and member of the Australasian Vehicle Safety Research Group, which is the I guess the group that sits behind the used car safety ratings, which we'll talk a little bit about today. So before I dig into it, though, the world of vehicle safety, as Greg said, between VIA and myself, we have a lot of really interesting conversations and really robust conversations, right? We don't have to always agree, but yeah, always good conversations and good to have the questions that do come from VIA and from their members. So I'm looking forward to some of those at the end of this. But to start with some clarity of the roles, because I think there is sometimes confusion around what is the role of NZTA versus what is the role of the Ministry of Transport. Obviously, MOT, I guess, is the true government department, if you like, that are responsible for setting the standards and working with the minister of the day. So the minister will direct them to do whatever needs to be done. And the NZTA essentially operationalised that standard. So we also, I guess, being a larger organisation, we provide expert advice back as well. So we do go backwards and forwards on some of the policy stuff. We have a lot of the SMEs and they have a lot of the policy people, if you like. As part of that, we obviously work closely with the industry and stakeholders, such as the group that are online today. For a little bit of context, though, like why do we care about vehicle safety? Well, the truth is that our fleet is not good at all. We have around 1.5 million or 1.45 million 1 and 2 star rated vehicles, and you can kind of go, so what? But realistically, people are twice as likely to be killed or seriously injured in those vehicles than they are in a safer vehicle. And price is not the issue, and we'll cover that again a little bit later on, and availability is not the issue. So really it's an awareness problem more so than anything. So it's something that we actually can do something about, and if we know those vehicles are twice as likely to cause harm to people, then surely it's something we should be doing something about, not just from a government side, but from an industry side and from a personal side as well, right? So if we look at that a slightly different way, when we look at the New Zealand fleet, and sorry, I know these graphs are probably very small on there, but if you look at that top right-hand graph there, that is the breakdown of the fleet. The black and reds are the 1 and 2 star cars. And if you can compare them, so that is the fleet in the top right, and below that is the deaths and serious injuries that occur in them. So if all things were equal, those two graphs would be the same. But you can see the 1 and 2 star rated vehicles are significantly overrepresented in those deaths and serious injuries. The graph along the bottom there, that has ages, so that is on the far left is 1990 across to 2021, and so it kind of shows that obviously newer vehicles are generally safer, but there are 5-star rated vehicles that are definitely 20 years old, so it's not strictly an age thing either, but again we'll come to a little bit more around that. For a bit more context, I guess our roading environment is not necessarily fit for purpose anymore. And obviously this is a really controversial one at the moment with talk around roads of national significance or speed limit increases and the likes. But in New Zealand, we really lack that safe system infrastructure, and we've made great progress on that in the last few years. So when we talk about safe system, I guess you can kind of simplify it by thinking about it as energy management, right? So in a crash, there is going to be energy. So we can either control that level of energy by slowing the vehicles down to have less energy, or we can put barriers in so that energy is more contained, or we can obviously put people in safer vehicles that disperse that energy better as well. But as it stands, our roading environment is not really fit for purpose. There's a lot of old, I guess, regulations that were put in place back in far before my time, and kind of we haven't kept up to speed, and that's probably why our deaths and serious injuries are disproportionate for our population size. So we are one of the poor performers in the OECD for vehicle safety. Obviously, our vehicle market is really unique as well, right? Our used imports mean that we can have vehicles that kind of look the same as the locally delivered ones, but may or may not be the same thing. So our market is very diverse. It is old as well, and it's incompatible. So we'll cover the incompatibility a little bit later on. But what I mean by that is big vehicles versus small vehicles, new vehicles versus old vehicles and the likes. But the outcome is that due to our fleet, it's unnecessarily impacting our friends and family, basically our communities. So I guess the question is, how do we fix this? Do we just mandate safety features? Is that going to be the best approach? Sadly, it's not. If it was, that would be quite easy, but it's really not. So these two vehicles here, we actually purchased both these vehicles. They're both 2010. They both have 2 airbags. They're both around the same size and around the same weight, but they have very different safety ratings of them. We crashed them into each other in Crash Lab in Australia. This is a 64 km/h head-on crash, and you can see quite a difference in the impacts. There is a crash test dummy on the 1-star rated vehicle, but the structure of the vehicle actually moves so much that the airbag ends up kind of closer to the center console. At the same time, the seat goes the other way. So yes, it's got 2 airbags, but the driver actually hits his head on the door frame. So you can't say airbags are the be all and end all, because for them to work, the structure has to stay in place. And so that's largely, I guess, why we look at the safety rating systems, because the safety ratings take into account those things that you can't see. So the structure, the design, the materials, all of those kind of things. I guess just I'll just jump back to that one. This crash here, 64 km an hour. A lot of people also do the maths badly on that. That is not 64 plus 64. It's basically they share out that crash load back, right? Mass times velocity squared divided by the number of impacts, number of parties involved. So at this one here, because they're a similar weight, that's 64 versus 64 basically. If the weight difference was bigger, then it would be a different outcome. Safety ratings, right? Due to our diverse fleet, we can't have a one-size-fits-all approach. So we actually have 3 different safety rating systems. ANCAP, which is the one that everyone knows, but actually only covers a very small amount of our fleet. So it's really important to kind of keep in mind. Used car safety ratings is actually the main rating system for the New Zealand fleet, and vehicle safety risk ratings looks after around a quarter of our fleet. I'll start off with ANCAP, and this is one of the conversations that we've had with VIA before. We don't start with ANCAP because we're prioritizing ANCAP over a different rating system. We start with ANCAP in these conversations because people know what it is, or at least think they know what it is, or have a basic understanding. And a lot of people, be it the public or in the industry, as soon as you say safety rating, they go ANCAP rating. And that's not necessarily the right approach. ANCAP is one rating system. So ANCAP ratings are based on lab testing. So that is, as you can see in the picture there, this testing takes place in Australia, or sometimes can be done by Euro NCAP as well, obviously in Europe. ANCAP obviously set a benchmark that evolves over time. So that's in line with people's expectations of safety and safety technology. So what that means is that the ratings actually only last for a period of 6 years from the date of test. I'll show you the next slide, will kind of explain that a little bit more. But what ANCAP are really big on is also testing the crash avoidance features. And there has been a lot of talk lately around the effectiveness of those features, not as far as how well they actually work, which is what ANCAP do cover, but also consumers' understandings of those features and how some people find them intrusive. So ANCAP's actually done a bunch of work on that recently, which is quite fascinating, showing that the vehicles that actually score highly for those crash avoidance feature tests aren't necessarily the ones that are annoying the consumer. So there is a lot of difference between a well-designed system that works well and a well-designed system that passes a test but actually annoys its occupants as well. But why ANCAP ratings only last for 6 years this is a good example here. Obviously, the protocols evolve over time, so the test gets harder and harder, if you like. So a vehicle that scored 5 stars in 2003 cannot be 5 stars by today's standard, because the benchmark has shifted so much over that time. This is just a simple indication of the different aspects that ANCAP look at, and you can see the significant difference there between what was tested in 2003 versus 2020. Used car safety ratings is I guess, in some ways, and especially for this group, the most important rating system. And it's done to understand it, you almost need to throw away everything you know about traditional crash testing, if you like. So used car safety ratings are based on real world crash outcomes that are recorded across Australia and New Zealand. So this has been going on for so long. There's a database of over 9 million vehicles now that are in that crash. And essentially, it works out your percentage chance of death or injury in those vehicles compared to all other vehicles on the road. It doesn't look at features at all. It doesn't look at vehicle size or vehicle mass or any of those kind of things. It is literally how good is your vehicle compared to all other vehicles. And one way that I guess you can explain this is if you have I guess a spreadsheet, and you've got your vehicle make and model, and then you've got your percentage chance of death or any serious injury. If you filter that, I guess from best to worst, chop that into 5 zones, that's your star bands, right? How does every vehicle compare against every other vehicle? The chart that we've got there shows the percentage chance of death or serious injury. The higher up you are on it, the higher chance of death, essentially, in each vehicle. So the worse the vehicle is, the lower, the better. Anything below the green line is 5-star. Anything between the green and the orange is 4-star, and so on and so on. Anything above the red line is a 1-star rated vehicle. The third rating system, Vehicle Safety Risk Ratings, VSRR, is based on the same concept, but it's where there's not enough crashes for a specific make and model to actually have a rating. So it takes around 500 police-reported crashes for a UCSR to be created. So that obviously takes a lot of time. And for some vehicles, especially in our unique market in New Zealand, we don't even have 500 of those vehicles here. So we're never going to get 500 of them crashing. So VSRR is based on year of manufacture and market group. So say 2010 small car, 2012 large SUV or commercial van or whatever it is. So the ratings, because the data size is so large, as we say, there's 9 million vehicles there, we've got a pretty good understanding of where that vehicle is likely to fall. Obviously, there are some discrepancies within that. We know that some brands perform better than some other brands. So we are working closely with Monash University in Melbourne at the moment, who do all the calculations behind the scene here to see if we can refine that system further based on the existing data. For both used car safety ratings and vehicle safety risk ratings, the key is that they're actually updated annually as well. So they are always relevant. Summary of the differences. So ANCAP, think of ANCAP as a benchmark that it wants every vehicle in the fleet to be 5-star, right? It sets the benchmark for manufacturers to achieve for new vehicles. Basically pushes them to have the latest technology, be it crash avoidance or manufacturing technologies. It obviously, it's a benchmark for them to achieve, and they are valid for a set period of time. UCSR and VSRR rate, and more importantly, almost rank the vehicles that are in the fleet. It's not a benchmark for them to achieve to enter, it's what happens with them in the fleet. So they're kind of two different things, but while ANCAP ratings last for a set period of time, 6 years from the data stamp, UCSR and VSRR are continually updated. And so we have an annual update on 1 December each year. So obviously that's coming up not too far away. Similarities, more stars, the safer the car. And that is the easy message, right? Think of it, dollars versus pounds or euros or whatever. More is more, right? Same kind of thing. More is more. Really important to note, there is only one rating that was actually recognised or correct for any given vehicle in the fleet at any one time. You don't have to remember all multiple things. Essentially, we do that all for you behind the scenes through RightCar and the underlying database. And we will always put out on RightCar website or through our API data feed that goes to the likes of TradeMe or to your, to your vehicle sales websites, most of the web companies we work with. And so the rating will always be correct that we push out. It's really important to note that consumers are becoming increasingly aware of the differences. And so you as industry need to be more aware as well. But sadly, as complex as that is, it actually gets a little bit more complex to understand as well, because within each rating system, they actually have different rating components that make up their system. So ANCAP, again, I use that first because it's easy to explain it, people understand it. ANCAP have 4 different pillars. You can see there in the circle. So adult occupant protection, pretty self-explanatory. Child occupant protection, vulnerable road user protection, that's anyone outside the vehicle, think pedestrians, cyclists, anyone who it comes into collision with, and safety assist. Safety assist is the crash avoidance features, A, B, lane keep, blind spot monitoring, all that kind of stuff. So those components there make up the ANCAP rating. It's largely similar for used car safety rating and vehicle safety risk ratings as well. We look at driver safety, how safe the occupant of the vehicle is, and other road user safety. And it's the combination of those things that forms the UCSR or VSRR rating, which we call overall safety. And so that is how good that vehicle looks after all road users. And obviously we know that every vehicle that crashes has a driver, but not every vehicle crashes into someone else. So there's some complex calculations in behind the scenes there about how often do they hit other vehicles and how often do they hit vulnerable road users, for example. And it's all scaled, but this vehicle here that I've used as an example may not be a good one in the way that it's 5-star through all, but some vehicles, take for example some of the larger utes or SUVs, they may look after their own occupants really well, but actually be really bad for anyone else who they crash into. And that can be other vehicle occupants as well as vulnerable road users. So that could drive down the overall safety rating. As Greg talked about before, there's a lot of conversations around compatibility at the moment as well, is bigger, heavier. You can't beat physics, but you can build a high rated or a well protecting larger vehicle, and you can also design a poor smaller vehicle. So it swings and roundabouts in a way. We know that not all manufacturers are the same, but as far as ANCAP is concerned, they are actually penalising the heavier vehicles now. They put in a weight modifier there, so if the vehicle is heavier, it does actually have a harder time getting a good ANCAP rating now, which is really good for all of society, right? Part of that is the mobile deformable barrier. You can just see in the photo there with the wheel is now been designed to match the average vehicle weight, whereas historically it was essentially like the vehicle was crashed into a stationary object, which is essentially crashing into itself. So a smaller vehicle had an easier time, and a heavier vehicle had a harder time. But it does change a little bit now with the new protocols, which is really good. But you also can't beat physics. In terms of compatibility, again, age is are newer vehicles better? You can see here in this chart on the left-hand side is obviously the older vehicles through to the newer vehicles on the right-hand side. And the average potential chance of death or serious injury does decrease over time. Newer vehicles are generally better. That should be no surprise, right? Technology's improved, materials have improved. Look at the the ultra high strength tensile steels and the likes from today. They're a lot different from what they were back in the old days. Seat belts, airbags, all of those kind of things. But we also know that not all brands are created equal, right? There are certainly poor performing new brands and well performing older brands or older models. So while newer should be better, it's not an absolute, right? So I wouldn't say a rolling age band, for example, is a good approach to improving the safety of the fleet, because you'd be knocking out a lot of good vehicles and a lot of bad vehicles. Compatibility with vulnerable road users, and this is hot topic at the moment. But we've actually done a bunch of work on this, and it comes back to that thing around New Zealand's fleet being quite diverse. So we see overseas, there's a lot of talk, and we'll talk, the next slide shows it quite well actually, around bigger vehicles impacting on vulnerable road users. Again, that's pedestrians and cyclists, for example. But in New Zealand, it's not quite the same, because our fleet is almost two different parts, right? We have the New Zealand new vehicles, which are generally those larger SUVs or larger utes, and our used imported vehicles, which are generally smaller, lighter vehicles that are slightly older. So our stats actually show the opposite, that there are more smaller vehicles in New Zealand involved in vulnerable road user DSIs, and that may be simply because they don't have the same technologies as the newer vehicles do. So blind spot monitoring, for example, or reversing cameras and the likes, simply due to age. So we can do a bunch more work on that. We actually have the fitment specs for all vehicles in the fleet now to know what's got what, and we can drill into that a little bit further. But it was quite fascinating doing this research and figuring that out, that is not quite the case. The other thing that is not mentioned on the slide, I guess, is that actually vans are significantly overrepresented in VRU DSIs, and that is potentially the likes of your couriers or delivery vehicles around town that again don't have those kind of features, but compared to the proportion of them in the fleet, they are overrepresented. So what that means is that we shouldn't compare ourselves to America, and this came out of a publication, I think it was New York Times actually, that published this recently, showing, and it was reproduced locally by an outlet here, showing that heavier vehicles are killing Americans, but when you dig into it more, it's actually more an American issue, right? It's their freedom. It's their right to not wear a seatbelt or drink and drive or be distracted or whatever. It was more an American issue than a vehicle issue. If they all had more sensible sized vehicles, their DSIs would only decrease around 10%. But they also buck the trend, as you can see in the graph there, and it's great that New Zealand is included. The red line being the pedestrian deaths. Our deaths are decreasing, even though our proportion of large vehicles are increasing. So America has an American problem, and that should probably be no surprise to people. In saying that, though, there is some really interesting research here. I know Kit on the line will be fascinated by this one. I'm sure I'll be sending it to him afterwards. This is about the compatibility of vehicles with other vehicles. So this is the work that Monash have done recently, looking at I guess the compatibility of our fleets. So if you imagine yourself in any of those vehicles listed down the left-hand side there, and obviously we've got van at the top, and then imagine that the vehicle's going across or anything who you crash into. That's actually got your chance of serious injury there. So anything above 1 is safer, and anything less than 1 is less safe. So basically, if you are in a van, you do not want to be crashed into by a large SUV, for example. So there's a bit of compatibility work there that is going on based on that whole database that underpins the used car safety rates. As I said, there's a database of 9 million crashes, so you can do fascinating things with the data. So yeah, this one here shows what you want to be in if you're going to be hit by someone else, or what is better for all of society, as well as the other part that comes out of this. And basically, we know that anything that has a ladder chassis, so your utes and SUVs and large SUVs and the likes, are not really good, even though they may protect their own occupants well. They're generally not that good for all of society. Somewhere in a medium or large car is a much better all-round outcome for all road users. So it kind of ties into a conversation that Kit has been having in particular from VIA, is really on that whole idea of thinking a little bit more holistically around vehicle safety. And that's actually, at the moment, we look at vehicle safety and vehicle environmental performance quite separately. And maybe he's right in saying that we shouldn't do that. These things, we do have ratings for environmental and for safety, but how do we kind of mold those two things together so that people can make choices that are not just better for themselves, but better for everyone, better for the planet as well? We know that there are vehicles that tick all boxes, like the one you can see on the bottom of the screen there. You all know what it is. It's looks after all road users, it looks after its occupants, and it looks after the environment. The one on the top, yeah, not as much, right? It may look after its occupants, but not so good fuel economy, not so good carbon emissions, and terrible for air pollution. So air pollution being what affects you as a person, whereas the carbon affects the planet. So slightly different aspects of the environmental rating system. So I know there's a bunch of work in this space, and it's really fascinating to kind of see how it all comes together to see if we can have a holistic view of safety. For now, though, what can you do in the industry, or even as just someone who, if you're not even selling cars yourself, if you're on this call or watching this later on YouTube, chances are that you are kind of the go-to vehicles person for someone. Your neighbor might come to you, your workmate might come to you. What can you do? Well, it's really about educating them around safety ratings. And we have a bunch of resources on the Right Car website for that. But this here is an example of what not to do. This is a vehicle I found on Trade Me the other day, and I'm sure I can find plenty more if I take a very quick look. This is a dealer advertising a vehicle, and it says in their advert 5-star NCAP safety rated, but also names actually the New Zealand new model, which is not the tested model. So that vehicle there, a used import, never had an NCAP safety rating, because NCAP ratings don't apply to used imported vehicles. They only apply to New Zealand new vehicles. So it never had it when it was new, but the fact that the NCAP test for that vehicle that this dealer is referring to was 2014 means that even if it did have it when it was new, it's actually expired by now. So that is false advertising, basically. And I guess as a consumer, if I saw that, I would wonder, what else is that dealer not telling me? What are the lies are they willing to spin to me to sell that vehicle? Because they're either not honest or they're not educated. Either way, it's not a good look for the dealership. The correct rating, and we work closely with Trade Me and anyone else who has our API data feed as well that sends the safety ratings out. Correct rating is displayed there on the advert, 4-star based on used car safety rating. So what I'm saying is, be careful to educate yourself. Your customers are knowing more and more. So you don't want to be the person who's got false advertising. There could be all sorts of repercussions from that later on down the track as well. If you sell the vehicle under false pretenses and the client finds out later on, it's probably not a place you want to be. So educate yourself. Another example here, different dealership found on Trade Me the other day, same thing. They actually put in there that this vehicle had a 4-star NCAP safety rating when it's actually got a 5-star safety rating based on used car safety ratings. So again, make sure you're up to date. Make sure you, I guess, either, if you're not skilled up on safety ratings, we would be happy to run through one-on-ones with you on that. It is very complex. We're well aware, but as I say, we do have some resources on the Right Car website to go through for that. And one easy way to actually do it is by producing the safety rating labels. So these will be come out through the VEAL tool, basically, which obviously as you know, you have to display the economy label. So you should be able to print out safety rating labels with them. And if you've got those on the cars around your yards, obviously that's an easy way to work out what's what. And it's an easy way to not get caught out because you've got the safety rating right there. You can tell the consumer the truth, they're going to see it. So it does help to really educate yourself with it. This cost of vehicles is always an interesting one because you have people, and we see it all the time. I can't afford $50,000 for a safe vehicle. It's like, you don't actually need that. We know that safe cars are far more affordable than what people think. Again, we've worked closely with Trade Me to have some sales data there to work out what vehicles are selling for, and we can model this data in various different ways. But basically what our data shows is that if you can afford a 2-star car, so that is the red line there, then generally you can afford a 4-star car. It's the green line. There are some exceptions, we're well aware. Utes, for example, utes hold their value. So you cannot buy a safe, cheap ute because you basically can't buy a cheap ute at all unless it's terribly old. So you can see where that goes. But in general, for most kind of vehicles, safe vehicles are affordable. We've also got some other data that shows where the vehicles are as far as deprivation index around the country as well. So deprivation indices show, I guess, every group of people around the country, and it's done through the census data. Deprivation index 1 is the wealthy parts of the country. Dep index 10 are the poorer parts of the country. And you can see there the distribution of 1- and 2-star rated vehicles is actually very similar throughout the whole country. Dep index 10, the poorer parts, actually just has less vehicles in general, but actually still has quite a high number of high rated vehicles as well. So again, it's not a price thing, it's just an awareness thing. So this is where we ask for your help to try and encourage people to educate themselves, display safety ratings, find out what it's all about. And because as we saw at the start, it could be a life-changing decision. What does this look like in the real world? Again, we're trying not to name certain brands here or anything, but you can see in the real world these 2 vehicles, and these are parked outside almost every college in the country. Same age, same size, same engine size, same kilometers, same transmission, if you like. Very different safety ratings. So 4-star safety rating for the bottom one, and a 2-star for the top one. So which is better to put your customer in, your own child in, your partner in, your neighbors in? It doesn't necessarily cost more. But we're also aware it's not all on you. We have a large part to play as well as a government organisation, and so we're continuing to work collaboratively with industry groups like with VIA and MIA and NTA and all the other associations as well. And we'll continue to promote vehicle safety as a key component of the safe system approach. We also work closely, as you've seen with some of the data here, around kind of what a price is doing over the time, and what are safety features, crash avoidance features doing over time as well. Like, do you have to pay more for a vehicle that's got automatic emergency braking or blind spot monitoring? And we're kind of just watching how that plays out, and we've got all this data, and we can kind of slice it and dice it through different ways. So it's a fascinating view of the fleet. And obviously we'll continue to work with MOT that do write the policy on the best approaches to improving the fleet. That is almost it, but one thing I did forget to cover there was actually the during the ANCAP ratings was the media article recently around the Hondas that were the New Zealand and Australian versions were different to the version sold overseas, and there was some conversation around that, around the different safety features that they had. So that is why I guess ANCAP ratings do not apply to used imported vehicles, or they only apply more specifically to vehicles that are imported by the New Zealand representative, and actually a lot of data is recorded for them. So there's around 100 different line items of data that are recorded for new vehicles entering the country, compared to used imports where the data recorded is very slim. So the vehicles have to match the specifications tested by ANCAP, largely because the crash avoidance features. So an ANCAP rating can only be applied to a specific variant, if you like. And so that's where we have the Honda conversation that was happening recently. So apologies, I missed that when we went through ANCAP. But I'm happy to move on to any questions that you may have from there. The contact address you see there, safevehicles@nzta.govt.nz, that actually goes directly to me. So if you do have any questions, feel free to save that address. You'll also find that as the contact address on the Right Car website as well. So let's say it comes straight to me. Happy to answer any questions, and happy to run through anything you've seen here today in more detail, or any other questions you may have that, that you don't want to ask today. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Well, hey, thanks, Todd. That was exactly what I was hoping for. Comprehensive, educational, interesting. There was quite a few things. I grabbed a couple of questions, and I can see there's probably oh yeah, Kit's got a question too. I will pull rank and I'll ask a couple of my questions first, and we'll see if we also get anyone from the audience. First up question, I was wondering, are there cars that have no rating? Like we have you've got ANCAP, you've got USCR, you've got VSSR or VSR. Is there any car that would actually sit out there that doesn't have one of those ratings?
Very few. We actually have 99.9% of the fleet covered now, and that is largely due to how VSRR works, right? So that is we can assign that to almost anything if we have a year of manufacture and a market group. So as long as we know the size of it effectively in the year, then we can rate it. So there are the handful of vehicles that are not rated are generally weird and wonderful exotics that the person who buys that car is not looking for a safety rating, shall we say. So yeah. But yeah, 99.9% of vehicles in the fleet are rated now.
Yeah, cool. And I think you sort of touched on it just towards the end there, because you're talking about ANCAP, you referenced Euro NCAP, and there is JNCAP, the Japanese NCAP. But I think what I picked up from what you were saying is that the different areas have different testing protocols or different criteria. So is the reason we don't look at or use JNCAP that those whatever they test for in Japan doesn't line up to what we would test for down here?
Yeah, really, really good question, and you've summarized it pretty much there. So JNCAP does have different test protocols, but what is similar though is that the ratings only last for a certain amount of time, and in general, the vehicles coming into New Zealand are outside that time frame anyway. So even if we did use JNCAP ratings, it would actually only add ratings for a very small number of the fleet, and the additional confusion that it would add compared to the ratings that it adds it actually doesn't add up. So it's, as you've seen today, it's very technical already. It's hard to explain. Adding a fourth rating system that would only end up covering an even smaller number of vehicles is really not the right approach. It's definitely something that we've looked at and we've tried to figure out, but yeah, it's not the way to go.
And I think in my last question before we unleash Kit, basically that there is that thing which is Right Car is pretty much the source of truth. Go to Right Car, see what safety rating it says there, because even for a New Zealand new vehicle that's now in the second-hand churn, you'd want to be looking for that because that expiry date's probably come through. It's over 6 years old. The ANCAP is not necessarily may not necessarily be the right rating. You want to be looking to see what that right rating is.
Correct. We essentially we do all the hard work so you don't have to, right? So look at Right Car, or if as I keep referring to Trade Me or Auto Trader or Driven, they all have our API data feed as well. So the correct safety rating feeds through automatically, and you don't need to think about it. But that's when it also looks interesting when that feeds through and you're writing an advert that says something that contradicts it. It doesn't look good. So but in saying that, obviously, if there are vehicles, whenever you're listing something and you go, this doesn't look right, feel free to let us know, and we're happy to take a look. If there are any vehicles that the rating is incorrect on for any reason, we will definitely try and fix any of those issues as soon as they pop up. So
cool. Doesn't look like we've got any other questions from the wider audience, but Kit, go for it. Have at them.
Thanks. No, it's easy question, or not easy question, but pertinent question for the listeners. So your vehicle ratings are updated annually, and that's happening soon. Is that correct? You'll get the latest updates from Monash.
Yeah, so 1 December each year is when we try and land them. We know it is a little awkward timing because it comes close to that kind of Christmas crazy period and the likes, but basically the calculations get done all throughout the year, and that's kind of as soon as we can get them to put them out. And we try and I guess advise the industry around that time as well through the likes of your own association and others to kind of go, hey, check, things may have changed. But yeah, and it probably is, I guess, a good call for almost industry to do a refresher on how ratings are calculated at that time of year as well, perhaps.
Yeah, well, that's what we're doing now. So, and then, so is there an expectation as far as when the industry should have their data updated to the new ratings? I know previously, sorry, let me just throw this in real quick. Previously, there was an interaction between the clean car discount and safety ratings, or nothing under 2-star. So that's why this particular period in all of our lives was really important, because we needed to know which vehicles we were bringing in were suddenly going to be eligible for, which happened a lot more than we're no longer going to be eligible for the discount. But that is not relevant anymore, that the clean car discount is not in effect. So the ratings are still important for us to have in our advertising, but
it's you're right in saying it's probably not as critical in a way. There's not money on the line for it, right? I guess our message is kind of always try and make sure that your ratings are up to date. That 1 December date is the only date of the year when ratings are likely to change. So as I say, the public are more aware. So it's really helpful if you are more aware as well as industry, right? Like, you want to be able to answer the questions that come in, or if the public come in, you don't want them kind of picking holes in what you're saying. So I guess while there's no strict mandate that you must update or reprint labels or anything like that, I guess we're encouraging you just to have a look and on that 1 December date and see how things have fallen. We do work closely with the likes of VIA and try and advise which vehicles have changed, and so obviously you're able to do your own communications to industry as well on if there are any high volume sellers, say, that may have changed from where they are.
Cool. Thanks for that question, Kit. Malcolm, I'm going to skip you because I see Rob Young's got his hand up. So we'll go to Rob and then we'll come back to you, Mal.
Yeah, hi there, Todd. There's a close correlation between a country's GDP and the average of the average vehicle age. So just wondering what consideration the government has given to their policy when taking into consideration what the average Kiwi can afford to purchase. We'd all love to buy the latest and greatest car, but at the end of the day, most people's value is sort of in that $10,000 to $25,000 range, and it also needs to sort of fit their purpose as well. So they can't all be nipping around in an EV when they need to transport their 4 children.
Yep. No, good question. I guess policy is really the realm of MOT rather than us, and there is no policy work on vehicle safety ratings at the moment. We know there are better ways to sort of guide what comes into the fleet than safety ratings, but safety ratings are the best advisory tool for vehicles that are already here in the fleet. So So that probably doesn't necessarily answer it, but as I say, policy is more of an MOT than us. But we do know that for any proposed policies in this space, obviously there is a lot of consultation goes out. We've seen recently Euro 6, for example, has gone out, and the MOT and NZTA have worked closely with the industry on the Euro 6 work. I'm not directly involved in that to know what work has been done on vehicle pricing, but we do have a pretty good database that matches up pricing to emission standards and vehicle safety features and across the different market groups and the like. So we do have information there that can hopefully help guide those conversations. So hopefully that covers it.
Oh, thanks, Malcolm.
Yeah, just wondering, Todd, if you could, if you got any comment to make on what ANCAP have been saying lately about some of the ADAS systems, such as the difference in aggressivity of say lane keep assist on some vehicles and that sort of thing. If you can give us a bit of a heads up on where you're at and what, you know, how they're going to fix it.
So I guess the really interesting thing with that, and there is a great slide that's kicking around that I haven't included in here, on those systems, that I guess ANCAP did recently test. It was four vehicles that had been previously rated, and it was for the lane keeping assist to see how violently they were steering the vehicles back in, and it was off the back of, I guess, consumer complaints, basically saying this vehicle is doing things that I don't think it should be doing. ANCAP retested those vehicles and took a slightly different approach to measure the exact angle that it steered them away from the lines on, and found that even the ones that steered them away the least aggressively were actually, you know, they were 5-star rated vehicles. So it's not a rating system that is forcing the vehicles to behave badly. It was more of a poor engineering system, and they can have ones that behave nicely and meet the requirements. I think those vehicles are going to be named shortly, so it'll be interesting to see what happens when that comes out of the 4 that were tested. But I guess the other thing with ANCAP is ANCAP actually does work with the manufacturers as well to be like, hey, we've found this thing, you might want to look at fixing it or changing it. And there have been a couple of examples over the recent, probably last 2 years, of new vehicles that were coming to market where ANCAP's tested them prior to launch, essentially, and found things that have gone, oh, hang on, and gone back to the manufacturer. And the manufacturer has actually re-engineered different pieces on the vehicles to make sure that they are a better vehicle before it actually reaches the market, which is really good, right? It's working that way as almost an independent testing of the vehicle before it reaches full production stage is really positive.
Wow, I think we've covered it. Oh, here we go. Another hand up, Wendy.
Yeah, so not really a question, just a request. Unfortunately, I was driving the first 10 minutes of the meeting and didn't get to see all of the presentation. Are you able to share that with us, or is that not a?
Yeah, I think it'll be fine. I will check, and I'll liaise with Greg and Malcolm and Kit on that and try and get them to send out to you. Otherwise, I think Greg said that this is going up online as well. So
yeah, I'll be clipping this and putting it on the VIA YouTube channel, and I'll put a note out about that as well. We have a monthly email comes out at the end of the month, which will link through to latest webinars, and so that'll be there. Yeah, and Todd, if you look to see all or some of that presentation, because there was a lot of really cool information there, whatever you can share, we'll get that out to people as soon as we can as well.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
And obviously, I'm aware it is very technical, and it is very, you know, it's a lot to try and cram into a very short conversation as well. So very happy to answer any questions that people may have later on. And say safe vehicles at nzta.govt.nz does come directly to me, so it's a nice, easy address to remember.
Well, great. Well, that's we've kept within time really well. I think we've covered a massive amount of information there. That's been really good. So thanks very much to Todd from NZTA. Thank you to everyone who joined today. We had yeah, nearly 20 people on today interested in this, which I think was a great turnout to talk about something that can be pretty technical and people can glaze over sometimes with I certainly skipped the spreadsheet bit. That was no, that was good to see that. So I mean, always good to see data showing us why policy is set in a certain way and why things happen in certain ways. So that was really good to see. As I've said, we will be putting this video up on the YouTube channel hopefully within the next couple of days, but we'll certainly put a note out to the industry. And I am open to hearing from the industry as to what sort of topics you might want to see on the webinars. We're aiming to try and do a webinar each month. I'm thinking of topics over the next couple of months of things like having someone from the insurance industry coming and talking about business insurance. That's one of the areas I've been thinking of. Happy to hear from people about topics they might want to talk about. I could also line up someone from the PR sector to maybe talk about comms and crisis comms. There's all sorts of things that we could be talking about, but I'm happy to take suggestions. That helps us with making sure that we're putting out a webinar that meets the needs of what the industry wants to be hearing about and talking about. So, but for now, thanks again, Todd. Thanks to everyone for attending. And we will see you all next month for our next webinar. So thank you.
Cool. Thank you, Greg.